I won the lottery and kept it a secret because of what I discovered about my wife. Howard Harrison held the winning lottery ticket with trembling hands, while the sound of laughter coming from the living room echoed through the house. At 62, he had just discovered he was the lucky winner of $23 million, but the joy he should have felt was being smothered by a deep anguish growing in his chest. That Saturday night, his children and daughters-in-law were celebrating with beers at the kitchen table, marking another wedding anniversary for the parents. But while they laughed carefree, Howard remained seated at the light wood table he had made himself 20 years ago, his head resting on his right hand, trying to process the devastating phone conversation he had overheard his wife Martha having an hour before. "I can't stand this simple life anymore, Brenda," Martha had said on the phone, unaware her husband was on the other side of the bedroom door. 30 years married to a building superintendent who will never give me anything beyond this small house and a dull life. I'm filing for divorce on Monday." The words still echoed in Howard's mind like stab wounds. For 3 decades, he had worked as the superintendent of a commercial building in downtown Denver, waking up every day at 5 in the morning to ensure the family never went without. He had religiously bought the same lottery numbers every Wednesday for 15 years, always dreaming of providing a better life for Martha and their 2 children, Gregory and Heather. "Dad, you're very quiet today," said Heather, approaching the table where Howard remained thoughtful. She had inherited her mother's brown hair but had her father's kind eyes. "Aren't you going to toast with us?" Howard lifted his face and forced a smile for his 35-year-old daughter. The contrast between her joy and the weight he carried in his heart was almost unbearable. "Of course I will, my dear. I was just thinking about work tomorrow." "Dad, it's Saturday. Tomorrow is Sunday," laughed Gregory, the older son of 38, who worked as a mechanic at a shop in the Commerce City neighborhood. "You have to stop worrying so much." Martha appeared in the kitchen at that moment, carrying a tray with homemade hors d'oeuvres. At 59, she still maintained the beauty that had won Howard over in their youth, but her eyes held a coldness he was only now beginning to notice. "Here, I brought some cheese puffs I made this afternoon," she announced, smiling at the children and avoiding her husband's gaze. "Let's enjoy having everyone together." The irony of the situation was cruel. There was the whole family gathered, celebrating Howard and Martha's marriage, while she had already decided to destroy it all. The superintendent watched his wife's every move, searching for signs he had ignored for years. The forced smiles when he came home from work, the rush to end conversations when he tried to talk about the future, the way she averted her eyes when he showed affection. "Mom, you made the cheese puffs that Dad likes the most," commented Heather, biting into one of the hors d'oeuvres. "I remember when I was little and you made them every Sunday." "Oh, that was a long time ago," replied Martha, with a tone that carried more melancholy than nostalgia. "Things change, right? Life teaches that sometimes we need to seek new paths." Howard felt his stomach tighten. Even in conversation with the children, Martha was planting the seeds to justify her future decision. It was as if she were rehearsing the speech she would use to explain the divorce. "Daniel, tell them about that trip we're planning," said Kimberly, the younger daughter-in-law, married to Gregory for 2 years. She was a cheerful woman who always treated Howard with great affection. "Oh, yes." Daniel Miller perked up, who was actually the youngest son-in-law married to Heather. "We're saving up to go to Miami for spring break. It'll be the first trip we take together with the kids." "That's wonderful, son," said Howard, trying to show genuine interest. "You deserve it. You work so hard." "You deserve a vacation too, Dad," said Heather. "When was the last time you and Mom traveled?" The silence that followed was awkward. Howard and Martha exchanged a quick glance, both knowing they hadn't taken a trip together in over 5 years. And even then, a trip to the Atlantic coast to visit Martha's sister, she had spent the whole time complaining about the simple hotel and the lack of interesting activities. "We're focused on other things right now," Martha replied vaguely. "Maybe in the future." Howard discreetly touched his pants pocket where he had kept the winning ticket. $23 million could provide all the trips Martha had ever dreamed of. They could buy the beach house she always mentioned when they passed by the Myrtle Beach shoreline. They could transform the simple life she despised into something completely different. But he had learned something fundamental that afternoon. Love cannot be bought. but the lack of it can be revealed when money enters the equation. "You know what I was thinking about today?" Martha continued, grabbing a beer from the refrigerator. "How our life could have been so different if we had made other decisions back then." "How so, Mom?" asked Gregory, not noticing the growing discomfort in the room. "Oh, nothing major. It's just that sometimes I wonder what it would have been like if I had accepted that job offer in New York City when you were little." Howard remembered that occasion well. Martha had received an offer to work as a secretary at a large company in the state capital. The salary was better, but it would have meant leaving Denver, their family, their friends. Together, they decided it was better to stay and build their life in the city where they were born. At the time, it seemed the most sensible decision for the children's sake. "But Mom, if you had gone, we wouldn't have grown up near our grandparents," Heather reminded her, "and Mr. Howard wouldn't have gotten the permanent job at the building he still works at today." "True," agreed Daniel, "and you two are an example for us. 30 years of marriage, always united, always focused on family." The son-in-law's words fell like lead on Howard's heart. If he only knew what Daniel would know in a matter of days. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Martha averted her gaze once more, and Howard realized she was struggling to maintain the facade of the satisfied wife. How many times in recent months had she forced that smile? How many conversations about the future had she avoided? And more importantly, how long had she been planning that moment? "Do you guys remember that lottery game Dad always plays?" Heather asked suddenly, changing the subject. "Always the same numbers, every Wednesday." Howard's heart almost stopped beating. Instinctively, he pressed his hand against the pocket holding the ticket. "Oh, your father's little habit," Martha laughed, but there was a critical tone in her voice. 15 years throwing money away on that illusion." "It's not exactly throwing money away, Mom," Gregory defended. "It's just $2 a week. And you never know, right? One day he might get lucky." "One day he might get lucky," Martha repeated, with an irony only Howard could catch, as if luck could solve our problems. In that moment, Howard understood that his wife did not believe in miracles, did not believe in change, did not believe in him. To her, he would always be the building superintendent who earned a modest salary and bought lottery tickets like a naive dreamer, and perhaps that was exactly what she had said to the man she was speaking with on the phone. "Brenda, you need to understand me." The conversation Howard had overheard earlier had continued. "I married very young. I thought love was enough. But now, at 59, I see I need more. I need someone who truly values me, who gives me the life I've always wanted." Brenda was Martha's younger sister, divorced for 3 years, and who always encouraged her sister to pursue her happiness. Howard never really liked her. He thought her opinions on relationships were too radical. Now he understood that Brenda was more than a confidant. She was an ally in Martha's decision. "Howard is a good man, I won't deny that," Martha had continued on the phone. "But being good isn't enough. He will never give me more than what he has today, and I can't spend the rest of my life waiting for things to get better." The cruelty of those words still echoed in Howard's mind. 30 years dedicated to the family, 30 years waking before sunrise to work, 30 years saving every penny to ensure nothing was lacking at home. And in the end, Martha saw all of that merely as being good, something insufficient for a shared life. "Dad, are you really okay?" insisted Heather, noticing her father seemed absent again. "You look worried." "I'm fine, honey, just a little tired." "It's the work," Martha said quickly. "Your father doesn't know how to rest. Always worried about that building, as if it were his." Howard looked at his wife with an expression she couldn't decipher. How could she criticize him even in front of the children? So subtly it seemed like concern. "Dad's work is important, Mom," defended Gregory. "Tay took care of us our whole lives with that job." "Of course it's important," Martha agreed, but her tone revealed she didn't believe what she was saying. "I just think sometimes we need to consider other possibilities." There it was again, planting the seed. Howard wondered if the children would be able to perceive what was happening, or if Martha's skill at manipulating situations was so refined it would go unnoticed until the final moment. The conversation was interrupted by the loud laughter of Kimberly and Daniel Miller. who were flipping through an album of old photos on a cell phone. "Look at this photo of you two at the wedding," exclaimed Kimberly, showing the screen to everyone. "How young you were." It was a photo of Howard and Martha on their wedding day in 1993. He was 29 and worked as a general helper in a metalworks factory. She was 26 and was a sales clerk at a clothing store downtown. Both dreamed of a simple but happy life. Children, a home of their own, stability. "I was very different back then," murmured Martha, looking at the photo with an indefinable expression. "Different how?" asked Heather. "More hopeful, perhaps." Howard felt a pang in his chest. Martha was saying between the lines that he had destroyed her hopes over the years, that the life they had built together had been a disappointment to her. "But you accomplished a lot," argued Daniel. "Raised 2 wonderful children, bought this house, built a solid family." "Yes," Martha agreed without enthusiasm. "We did what was expected." The coldness of that response left everyone somewhat embarrassed. Gregory tried to break the tense mood by telling an anecdote about work, but Howard could barely pay attention. His mind was consumed by the reality unfolding before his eyes. He observed Martha for the rest of the evening, noticing details that had previously gone unnoticed. The way she avoided any public display of affection, as if kissing her husband were a burden. The way she steered the conversation away whenever someone mentioned the couple's future plans. The distant looks, as if she were always thinking of being somewhere else. "Well, I think it's about time we head out," announced Kimberly around 10 o'clock. "The kids have to get up early tomorrow for soccer." "We should be going too," said Daniel, standing up and stretching his arms. "It was a very nice evening. Thank you for dinner, Mrs. Martha." "Don't mention it, dear. You know you're always welcome whenever you want." As they said their goodbyes at the door, Howard hugged each of his children tighter than usual. A painful intuition told him this might be one of the last times they would all be together as a united family. "Dad, take care of your health, okay?" whispered Heather in his ear during the hug. "You seem a bit down lately." "I'll be fine, my dear. Don't worry. And Mom too," she added, looking at Martha. "You both seem a bit off today." "Everything's normal, dear," Martha replied quickly. "Just the daily tiredness." After everyone had left, the house was enveloped in a heavy silence. Howard helped Martha clear the glasses and plates from the table, but she barely looked at him. It was as if he were a ghost in his own home. "I'm going to take a shower," announced Martha, when they finished putting everything away. "It's been a long day." "Martha," Howard called before she went up the stairs. "What is it?" For a moment, he thought about telling her everything, about the lottery ticket, about the $23 million, about how they could finally have the life she always wanted. But the words from the phone conversation still echoed in his mind, and he remembered she had criticized exactly that habit of his, buying lottery tickets. "Nothing. Never mind. Go take your shower." Martha went up the stairs without looking back, and Howard was left alone in the living room. He took the ticket from his pocket and looked at it again, confirming he wasn't dreaming. There were the numbers he had played religiously for 15 years. 03, 11, 15, 23, 31, 44. 6 numbers that had completely changed his life, but now seemed more like a curse than a blessing. Sitting on the sofa he had bought on a 12-month payment plan 8 years ago, Howard tried to organize his thoughts. If he told Martha about the prize, she would certainly stay. But would she stay out of love or out of interest? And if she stayed out of interest, what kind of marriage would that be from then on? On the other hand, if he didn't tell her, she would file for divorce on Monday as she had planned. And he would lose not only his wife but also half the prize, as the money would be considered marital property. He picked up his phone and looked up divorce and asset division. What he discovered left him even more troubled. According to federal law, lottery prizes won during a marriage were considered joint property, regardless of who bought the ticket. Martha would be entitled to exactly $11.5 million. The irony was bitter. The woman who had spent years criticizing the $2 a week he spent on the lottery would benefit from millions of dollars from the same game she considered a waste. Howard went up to the bedroom an hour later and found Martha already in bed, pretending to be asleep. He knew she was awake by her uneven breathing, but he said nothing. He lay down on his side of the bed, keeping as much distance from her as possible, and stared at the ceiling for hours. For the first time in 3 decades of marriage, Howard felt completely alone beside his wife. On Sunday morning, Martha woke up early and made coffee as she always did. But there was something different in her movements, a haste that hadn't been there before. It was as if she were rehearsing her new routine, the one that would no longer include her husband. "Good morning," she said, when Howard came down to the kitchen. "Good morning." Breakfast was quiet and tense. Martha flipped through a magazine while she ate, avoiding any conversation. Howard watched her every gesture, searching for signs of the woman he had fallen in love with 30 years ago. "I'm going out for a bit today," she announced suddenly. "I need to take care of some things." "What kind of things?" "Nothing major, just some appointments I've been letting pile up." Howard knew she was lying. Martha had never been good at making up excuses, and after the conversation he'd overheard the day before, any vague explanation sounded like another piece of the separation plan. "Do you want me to come along?" "No need. They're personal things." Personal things. In 30 years of marriage, Howard had never heard Martha use that expression. They had always shared everything, from the simplest decisions to the most complex ones. Now suddenly she had personal things to take care of. After she left, Howard stayed alone in the house they had built together. Every room held memories of 3 decades of shared life. The kitchen where Martha would make dinner, while he helped the kids with their homework. The living room where they watched soap operas every night. The backyard where they had barbecues for every one of the children's birthdays. All of that would be just a memory in a matter of days. He decided to go out for a walk and ended up passing by the building where he worked. Even though it was Sunday, Howard had the keys and decided to go in to organize some documents. Work had always been his refuge in difficult times. The 12-story commercial building in downtown Denver was like a second home to him. He knew every hallway, every room, every problem that needed solving. The tenants respected him, and many had become friends over the years. It was honest work, something he was proud of, even if Martha had never seemed to value it. Sitting in the small room that served as his office on the ground floor, Howard took the lottery ticket out of his pocket again. $23 million. Enough money to never work again, to travel the world, to buy a beach house, to fulfill all the dreams Martha had mentioned over the years. But would she still have the same dreams if she knew he was the one who could make them come true? He remembered a conversation they'd had a few months back. They were watching a TV show about people who had won the lottery, and Martha had made a comment that at the time seemed casual, but now took on a different meaning. "It must be funny when someone poor wins a lot of money like that, all of a sudden," she had said. "People must look at them differently, right? You never know if they're interested in the money or the person." At the time, Howard had absent-mindedly agreed. Now those words echoed in his mind like a prophecy. Martha had inadvertently described exactly the situation he was in. If he told her about the prize, how would he know if she stayed out of love or interest? And if she decided to stay out of interest, what would it be like to live with someone who loved him only for the money he had? On the other hand, if he didn't tell her, she would leave thinking he could never give her more than he already did. She would leave without knowing he had won exactly at the moment she had decided to abandon him. His cell phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was a message from Gregory. "Dad, thanks for dinner yesterday. We noticed you and Mom seemed a bit off." "Is everything okay?" Howard looked at the message for several minutes before replying. "Everything's fine, son. Just tired from work. Don't worry." But everything was not fine. And Gregory, with his sensitivity as the eldest son, had noticed that something was different between his parents. Soon he and Heather would discover that their family was about to fall apart, and Howard had no idea how to explain the situation without hurting them deeply. He put his phone away and looked back at the lottery ticket. A decision needed to be made, and he had until Monday morning to decide what to do with that information. When he returned home in the late afternoon, Martha had not yet returned. Howard made a simple sandwich and sat on the back porch, watching the small garden they had planted together 10 years ago. The rose bushes were blooming, just as they did every year at that time. Life followed its natural course, indifferent to the human drama unfolding there. Martha arrived home just before 7, carrying a bag from a clothing store. "Did you buy anything?" asked Howard, trying to sound casual. "Just a blouse. It was on sale." She went straight upstairs to the bedroom, avoiding any longer conversation. Howard was left alone in the living room, trying to understand when exactly his wife had become a stranger in her own home. During dinner, they barely exchanged words. Martha seemed anxious, checking her phone several times and replying to messages quickly. When Howard tried to start a conversation, she answered in monosyllables or changed the subject. "Martha, can we talk?" "About what?" "About us. I feel like you've been distant lately." She stopped eating and looked him in the eyes for the first time in days. "Howard, sometimes people change, and sometimes they realize they want different things from life." "What kind of different things?" "I don't know, just different." It was the opening she was creating for Monday's conversation. Howard realized she was already testing his reactions, preparing the ground for what was to come. "We've built a good life here," he said softly. "Our children are doing well, we have our home, our stability." "Stability," repeated Martha with a bitter tone. "Sometimes I wonder if stability is enough." "What would be enough for you?" Martha looked away again, as if the question were too complex to be answered there at that moment. "I don't know, Howard. I think that's the question." But Howard knew she was lying. Martha knew exactly what she wanted. She just didn't have the courage to say it to his face. And perhaps it was better that way, because hearing the truth at that moment would be too devastating. They finished dinner in silence, and Martha went upstairs to the bedroom shortly after, claiming a headache. Howard stayed in the living room until late, mentally organizing all the details of the last few days, all the clues he had ignored, all the signs that his wife was no longer his. Around 11 o'clock, he went up to the bedroom and found Martha already asleep, or at least pretending to sleep. He lay down on his side of the bed, maintaining the distance that had become habitual between them, and stared at the ceiling once more. In the darkness of the room, with the sound of Martha's breathing beside him, Howard made a decision. He would not tell her about the lottery prize, at least not before discovering how far his wife's emotional betrayal went. If she was determined to leave, let her leave knowing only the man he always was, not the man the money could make him appear to be. It was a risky and painful decision, but it was the only way to know if anything real still remained between them, or if everything had become just a convenient facade she was tired of maintaining. On Monday morning, Howard woke up before the alarm and made coffee as he always did. Martha came down to the kitchen with a determined expression he hadn't seen before. It was as if she had made an irreversible decision during the night. "Howard, we need to talk," she said without even saying good morning. "About what?" "About our marriage." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Howard's heart began to beat faster, but he forced a calm expression. "What do you mean?" Martha sat in the chair opposite his at the kitchen table and took a deep breath before continuing. "I think we've reached a point where we need to be honest with each other. I'm not happy in this marriage anymore." The words came out directly and coldly, as if she had rehearsed them many times. Howard felt as if he had been punched in the stomach, even though he knew that moment would come. "I don't understand, Martha. Yesterday you were fine, at dinner with the kids." "No, Howard, I wasn't fine. I haven't been fine for a long time. I was just pretending because it's easier to pretend than to face reality." "And what is the reality?" "The reality is that we grew in different directions. I want things you can't give me, and you deserve someone who values what you have to offer." Howard realized she had turned her own dissatisfaction into a concern for him. It was a subtle manipulation, but an effective one. "What kind of things can't I give you?" "It's not about material things, Howard. It's about dreams, ambitions, a vision of the future that's different from the present." But it was about material things, yes. Howard knew that from the phone call he had overheard. It was about the simple life she despised, about the modest salary he earned, about the lack of prospects for financial growth. It was about everything that $23 million could instantly solve. "Martha, we can work on this. We can make different plans, seek new paths. No, Howard. I've thought a lot about this. I've already decided I want a divorce. The word fell between them like a bomb. After 30 years of marriage, 2 children raised together, a whole life built together, Martha had decided that all of it was no longer worth it. The boys, they'll be devastated. The boys are adults now. They'll understand that sometimes people need to follow different paths to be happy. And you believe you'll be happy without me? For the first time since the conversation began, Martha hesitated. Her eyes showed a flicker of doubt, but she quickly regained her composure. I believe I'll have the chance to find that out. Howard drank the last sip of his coffee and got up from the table. The lottery ticket was in his pants pocket, representing 23 million reasons to interrupt that conversation and completely change the course of that situation. But he remained firm in his decision not to reveal anything. All right, Martha. If that's what you want, I won't fight it. She seemed surprised by his calmness. You're not going to try to convince me to change my mind. You seem sure of your decision, and I've always respected your choices. Martha lowered her gaze, as if she expected more resistance from him. Perhaps a part of her wanted him to fight for the marriage, to show how much he loved her, and how he couldn't live without her. But Howard had learned that true love cannot be forced or negotiated. I'll look for a lawyer today, she said, to speed up the process. As you wish. And about the house. The house can stay with you. I'll manage. Once again, Martha seemed surprised. She expected a legal battle, discussions about asset division, complex negotiations. But Howard was making everything easy, because he knew he had resources she couldn't even imagine. Howard, are you sure? This house is all you have. This house was ours, Martha. If you don't want to share it with me anymore, then there's no point in me staying here. He picked up his work keys and headed for the door. I'm going to work. We'll talk more about the details later. Howard. He stopped at the door and turned to look at her. What? I'm sorry, I truly am. I know you are, Martha. And I'm sorry too. He left the house without looking back, carrying in his chest a mix of sadness and relief. Sadness for seeing the end of an era of his life, and relief for finally stopping pretending he didn't see the signs that had been there for so long. At work, Howard tried to focus on his routine tasks, but his mind couldn't detach from the morning conversation. Martha had confirmed everything he suspected, but in an even colder way than he had imagined. She not only wanted to separate, but she already had everything planned. The lawyer, the division of assets, even how to explain it to the children. During lunch, he received a call from Gregory. Dad, Mum called me a little while ago. She said you two need to talk to me and Heather about something important. What's going on? Howard closed his eyes, trying to find words for a situation he himself was still processing. Son, it's better we talk in person. Can it be tonight? Of course, Dad. But tell me one thing. Are you both in good health? We are in good health, yes. Then it's about the two of you? Gregory's emotional intelligence had always impressed Howard. Even from a distance, he could read between the lines of any family situation. Yeah, son. It's about the two of us. There was a silence on the other end of the line before Gregory responded. Okay, Dad. We'll talk tonight. But know that whatever it is, Heather and I love you both and will support any decision you make. His son's generosity almost made Howard cry right there, in the middle of work. Gregory and Heather didn't deserve to go through that situation, especially without knowing there was a financial solution that could change everything. The rest of the afternoon passed slowly. Howard fulfilled his duties automatically, but his mind was divided between the pain of separation and the possibilities the lottery prize represented. He could tell everything that night during the conversation with the children. He could show that the financial reason for the divorce no longer existed. He could try to win Martha back by proving he was capable of giving her the life she always wanted. But every time he considered that possibility, the words she had said on the phone came back to his mind. I married very young. I thought love was enough, but now I see I need more. The problem wasn't just financial. Martha had stopped loving him, or perhaps had never loved him the way he loved her. And money couldn't change that. At best, she would come back out of interest, and they would live a lie for the rest of their lives. When he arrived home in the late afternoon, Howard found Martha organizing some papers on the living room table. They were marriage documents, the children's birth certificates, proof of income. She was preparing for the visit to the lawyer with the efficiency of someone who had planned that moment long ago. "The kids will arrive at 8, she said, without looking up from the papers. "I've already spoken with them separately. I didn't go into details, just said we needed to talk about our marriage." "How did they react?" "They were worried, but not surprised. I think they've already noticed things aren't good between us." It was true. Gregory had shown that in the phone call, and Heather had mentioned on Saturday that she noticed their parents acting strange. The children had grown up observing their parents' relationship and intuitively knew something was wrong. "Martha, are you sure this is really what you want? Because after we talk to them, there's no going back." She finally lifted her face and looked him in the eyes. "Howard, I haven't been your wife for a long time. I'm just a woman who shares a house with you, and that's not fair to you or to me. And when did you realize this?" "I'm not sure exactly. It was gradual. One day I woke up and realized I didn't feel anything anymore when you came home from work. I didn't feel joy. I didn't miss you when you traveled. I didn't feel anything." The brutal honesty of the answer was like a stab to Howard's heart. Martha was describing the slow death of a relationship, a process she had experienced alone while he continued to love her as on the first day. "And did you try to fight it? Did you try to get back what we had?" "I did try. For years I tried. I faked enthusiasm. I faked interest. I faked happiness. But there came a point where pretending became more painful than the truth." Howard sat in the armchair, where he used to watch television every night, and tried to process that information. For years, Martha had been by his side, faking feelings she no longer had. For years he had lived in illusion, believing they were happy together when in reality she was just playing a part. "Why did you never tell me? We could have tried to work it out together." "Because I was afraid of hurting you, and because I hoped the feelings would come back on their own." "And now you're sure they won't come back?" Martha hesitated for a moment, as if considering the possibility. But then she shook her head no. "Now, I'm sure I need to try to be happy in a different way." The doorbell rang at 8 o'clock sharp. Gregory had always been punctual, a trait he inherited from his father. Heather arrived with him, and they both entered the house with worried expressions. "Hi, Dad." "Hi, Mum," said Heather, kissing them both on the cheek. "Are you guys okay?" "Let's sit in the living room," Martha replied. "We need to talk about something important." The four of them settled in the living room, with Howard and Martha on opposite sides of the room. The tension was palpable, and the children could feel something serious was about to be revealed. "What's going on?" asked Gregory directly. Martha took a deep breath before answering. "Your father and I have decided to separate." The silence that followed was deafening. Heather brought her hand to her mouth, as if trying to contain an exclamation. Gregory furrowed his brow and looked alternately at his parents. "Separate how? Are you talking about divorce?" "Yes," Martha replied firmly. "We're talking about divorce." "But why?" asked Heather. Her voice choked. "You've always been an example for us. 30 years of marriage. Sometimes 30 years is long enough for two people to realize they want different things from life," Martha replied, using the same words she had used that morning with Howard. "What kind of different things?" insisted Gregory. "You can work out any problem by talking." Howard watched the scene in silence. He saw the pain on his children's faces. He saw how the news was impacting them. Part of him wanted to end that suffering by telling them about the lottery prize, showing that the financial issue motivating the separation could be resolved. But another part knew it would only be postponing the problem, not solving it. "Kids, you need to understand this has nothing to do with you," said Martha. "You have always been and will always be the most important thing to both of us. But sometimes adults need to make difficult choices to be honest with themselves." "Dad, do you want this too?" asked Heather, turning to Howard. It was the question he feared. How to explain that he didn't want the separation, but that he had lost his wife to feelings she could no longer control. "Honey, I want your mother to be happy, and if she believes she'll be happier following a different path, I will respect that decision." "But what about you? Will you be happy?" Howard looked at Martha before answering. She was watching him with an indecipherable expression, as if she too was curious about his answer. "I will learn to be happy in a different way." Gregory got up from the armchair and began to pace the room. "This doesn't make sense. You didn't have a big fight, there was no betrayal, there was nothing that justifies such a radical separation." "Relationships don't always end because of big dramas," explained Martha. "Sometimes they simply wear out over time." "But you didn't even try couples therapy. You didn't try a second honeymoon. You didn't try anything." "Gregory, some problems aren't solved with external attempts," said Howard gently. "Some problems are internal, and each person needs to solve them alone." Heather began to cry silently, and Martha got up to comfort her. "My daughter, we will still be a family. It will just be a different family." "What do you mean different? You'll live apart, you'll date other people, you'll have completely different lives. How will that be a family?" Heather's question touched a sensitive point. Martha and Howard hadn't thought about the practical details of the separation, especially the emotional impact it would have on their adult children. "We will still be your parents," replied Howard. "That will never change, and you'll always be able to count on both of us, separated or together." "And the grandchildren?" asked Gregory. "How are we going to explain to my kids that their grandparents don't live together anymore?" "We'll explain it the same way I'm explaining it to you now," said Martha. With honesty and affection. The conversation went on for another 2 hours, with the children asking questions about the reasons for the separation and trying to find solutions to save the marriage. Martha held her position firmly, while Howard supported her decision without revealing his true feelings. When Gregory and Heather finally left, promising support to their parents despite their sadness, Howard and Martha were left alone in the emotionally devastated living room. "It was harder than I imagined," admitted Martha. "They'll be okay, they're adults, they'll understand in time." "You've been very understanding about all this, Howard, more than I expected." "Martha, I've loved you for 30 years. If you're no longer happy with me, then my duty is to let you go free to seek your happiness." She looked at him with an expression that mixed gratitude and something that could be remorse. "You've always been a good man." "Maybe that's the issue." "What do you mean? You were always too good for me." "I needed someone more complicated." Howard didn't reply, but he stored that phrase in his memory. Martha was confirming that the problem wasn't with him, but with her own expectations about what she wanted from a relationship. She didn't want stability and kindness. She wanted adventure and uncertainty. On Tuesday morning, Martha left early to meet with the lawyer. Howard took the opportunity to call the lottery and officially confirm he was the holder of the winning ticket. The process would be simple, but it would take a few days for the money to be released into his account. While he waited, he began making plans for his new life. First, he needed to decide where to live after Martha kept the house. Then he needed to think about how to use the money wisely, both to secure his future and to help the children without creating dependency. The most important thing, however, was deciding when and how to reveal the truth about the prize to the family. He couldn't keep that secret forever, especially because the news would be announced by the lottery in the coming weeks. In the afternoon, he received a call from Heather. "Dad, I talked with Gregory, and we decided something. We won't accept this separation without first trying to help you two reconcile. Honey, that's very generous of you, but no, Dad. We're going to organize a special dinner this weekend. Both of you, me, Gregory, and we'll talk as a family. We'll try to understand exactly where the problem is and how it can be solved." Howard was at a loss for words. The children weren't accepting their parents' separation and were willing to fight for their marriage, without knowing there was a wild card that could change everything. "Heather, your mother seems very determined. Dad, Mom is confused. Sometimes people get confused and make hasty decisions. But 30 years of love doesn't just disappear like that out of nowhere. If only she knew how wrong she was. Love could indeed disappear gradually, silently, until one day the person wakes up and realizes they don't feel anything anymore. That was exactly what had happened to Martha. "All right, honey. If you want to organize this dinner, I'll participate." "Thank you, Dad. And who knows, right? Maybe you'll rediscover what made you fall in love with each other 30 years ago." After hanging up the phone, Howard kept thinking about the children's naivety. They believed love was eternal, that marital problems always had a solution, that families could be saved with goodwill and frank conversations. Unfortunately, reality was more complex than that. When Martha arrived home that night, she was visibly calmer. The meeting with the lawyer had clarified the legal aspects of the separation, and she seemed relieved to have taken the first official step. "How did it go?" asked Howard. "It went well. The process will be simple, since we don't have major assets to divide and the children are adults. We don't have major assets to divide." If only she knew. "Heather called me today. She and Gregory want to organize a dinner for us this weekend." A reconciliation attempt. Martha sighed deeply. "I imagined they wouldn't accept our decision easily." "Will you participate?" "Of course. They need to see that our decision is final and thought out. Maybe it will be good for them to understand that we aren't fighting or holding grudges against each other." "And are you sure the decision is final?" Martha looked him in the eyes for a few seconds before answering. "I am, Howard. I'm sure." Once again, Howard felt the temptation to tell her about the lottery prize. $23 million changing hands at that very moment, and she didn't even suspect. It would be so easy to turn that certainty into doubt, that determination into regret. But he remained firm in his decision. If Martha was leaving his life, let it be while knowing only the man he always was, not the man the money could turn him into. On Wednesday, the routine of separation began to establish itself. Martha spent the day looking for apartments to rent, while Howard fulfilled his duties at work, trying not to think about the new reality taking shape. That night, they dined together for the last time as husband and wife, even though neither of them knew it would be the last time. The conversation was polite and practical, focused on the details of the separation and the division of personal belongings. "You can keep all the furniture," said Howard. "I'll only take my clothes and some personal items." "Are you sure? Some of the furniture is yours too." "I'm sure I'm going to start a new life, so it makes sense to start from scratch. Start a new life with $23 million in the bank." The contrast between what Martha knew and reality was almost comical, if it weren't so tragic. "Howard, I want you to know this isn't about you being a bad husband. You were always a decent man, hard-working, dedicated to your family, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't about being enough or insufficient. It was about being different from what I needed." "And what do you need?" Martha hesitated before answering, as if organizing thoughts she had never fully verbalized. "I need someone who challenges me, who makes me grow, who gets me out of my comfort zone. And I never did that. You always protected me, Howard. You always gave me security and stability. And for a long time that was exactly what I needed. But now I feel that protection has become a prison." Howard understood perfectly what she was saying. Martha had grown, had changed, and now saw his qualities as flaws. The stability she valued at 26 was now seen as a lack of ambition. The protection she sought when they were young was now interpreted as excessive control. "And you think you'll find that with someone else?" "I don't know, but I want to have the chance to try." There was the final confirmation. Martha wasn't just leaving a marriage, she was leaving in search of a specific person who could give her what she believed she needed. And Howard suspected that person wasn't an abstraction, but someone concrete with whom she had already established contact. On Thursday morning, while Martha went out to see more apartments, Howard received a phone call that would change everything. "Mr. Howard Harrison, this is the Federal Savings Bank calling. We're calling to confirm that you are the holder of the winning ticket for the Powerball drawing 2789. "Yes, that's me." "Perfect. Can you come to our branch today to begin the prize claim process? Some standard documents and procedures will be required." "I can come right now." "Excellent. And Mr. Howard, congratulations. You are officially one of the Powerball winners, $23,945,612.34. Howard wrote down the exact amount and hung up the phone with trembling hands. In a matter of hours, he would officially be a millionaire, and his wife had no idea she was giving up a fortune to pursue uncertain happiness with someone else. At the bank, the procedures were more complex than he expected. It took 2 hours to fill out forms, present documents, and sign contracts. The branch manager treated him with a reverence Howard had never experienced. "Mr. Harrison, would you like to open a special account for high-net-worth individuals? We offer differentiated services and personalized financial advice. For now, you can leave the money in my regular account. With all due respect, Mr. Harrison, a sum of this magnitude requires special care, protection against inflation, investment diversification, tax planning." Howard realized he had entered a completely different world, where problems he didn't even imagine existed became urgent matters. It was a universe Martha had always dreamed of knowing, and which was now within his reach exactly at the moment she had decided to leave. "All right, let's talk about those options, but I want absolute secrecy regarding this transaction." "Of course, Mr. Harrison. Bank secrecy is our priority." When he left the bank late in the afternoon, Howard was officially a multimillionaire, but instead of joy, he felt an immense weight on his shoulders. The money had arrived too late to save their marriage, but too early for him to use it without questioning the motives of anyone who approached him from then on. At home, he found Martha preparing dinner in a visibly better mood. She had found an apartment she liked and had already settled the rental details. "It's a small apartment, but in a great location," she told him excitedly. "Near downtown, with a nice view and rent that fits my budget." Howard watched her enthusiasm as she talked about her new independent life. It was as if she had regained an energy he hadn't seen in years. The prospect of separation wasn't causing sadness in Martha. It was causing liberation. "I'm glad you found a place you like. And you? Have you thought about where you'll live?" "Not yet, but I'll figure it out in the next few days." In truth, Howard could buy a mansion, a penthouse, a beach house, anything he wanted, but he still hadn't fully processed his new financial reality. In his mind, he was still the 62-year-old building superintendent who earned a modest salary. "Howard, I want you to know that, despite everything, I'm very fond of you. You'll always have a special place in my life." "Thank you, Martha. You'll also have a special place in mine." They ate dinner in silence, each immersed in their own thoughts. Martha planning her new single life, Howard trying to understand how to handle a fortune that could solve all the problems of the past, but that had come too late to matter. On Friday, preparations for the reconciliation dinner organized by the children dominated the conversations at home. Heather had reserved a special restaurant and asked her parents to dress up nicely for the occasion. "She really believes a romantic dinner will fix everything," Martha commented while choosing what to wear. "She loves you both and wants to see you happy." "And you? Howard, do you still love me?" The question caught Howard by surprise. It was the first time in weeks that Martha had shown curiosity about his feelings. "Why are you asking that now?" "Because sometimes I get the impression that you're making this separation too easy. As if you weren't happy in the marriage either." "Martha, I'm making it easy because I love you. If you were happy with me, I would fight for our marriage. But you've made it clear that you're not. So all I can do is make your search for happiness easier. Even if that means losing me. Even if that means losing you." Martha looked at him with an expression he couldn't interpret. There was something like admiration in her eyes, but also something that could be sadness. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm not making a mistake." It was the first time she had shown any doubt about her decision. Howard felt his heart race. If she was really having doubts, maybe there was still a chance. Maybe he should tell her about the prize, show her they could have the life she always dreamed of. "If you have doubts, maybe you should think it over before making a final decision. It's hard to leave someone who was always good to me, even if I don't feel what I used to feel anymore." And there was the confirmation that revealing the prize would be useless. Martha might have doubts about the separation, but she had no doubts about her lack of feelings for him. It was a rational decision, not an emotional one. And money could influence a rational decision, but it couldn't recreate feelings that no longer existed. Martha, you need to be true to your feelings. If you don't love me anymore, staying with me would be unfair to both of us. You're right, as always. On Saturday night, they met with Gregory and Heather at the restaurant she had chosen. It was an elegant place, with live music and a romantic atmosphere clearly designed to evoke nostalgia in the couple. "You both look nice," said Heather when her parents arrived. "It had been a while since I'd seen you get dressed up together to go out." It was true. Martha had chosen a blue dress that Howard had always complimented, and he was wearing the suit she had given him as a gift on his 50th birthday. Superficially, they looked like an elegant couple celebrating decades of happy marriage. "The menu here is wonderful," said Gregory, trying to keep the mood light, "and they have an excellent wine selection." During the first part of the dinner, conversation flowed naturally between family matters and old memories. Heather had prepared a photo album on her phone, showing special family moments over the years. "Look at this photo from your wedding," she said, passing the phone to her parents. "You were so young and looked so in love." Howard looked at the photo and remembered that day perfectly. Martha was radiant in the simple dress they had bought on installments. He wore a suit borrowed from his older brother. They were young, poor, but full of dreams and hopes. "We really were very young," said Martha, looking at the photo with a melancholic expression. "And very much in love," added Howard. "So what changed?" asked Heather directly. "What made two young people in love turn into two people who want to separate?" Martha and Howard exchanged glances, both knowing that question was the center of the entire conversation Heather had organized. "People change, dear," answered Martha. "Dreams change, priorities change, feelings change. But shouldn't true love be stronger than those changes?" insisted Gregory. "Perhaps," said Howard, "but sometimes true love means accepting that the person you love needs to be happy in a different way." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. The conversation stretched on for hours, with the children trying to find solutions to their parents' marital problems, and the couple patiently explaining that some situations don't have simple solutions. By the end of the evening, it was clear to everyone that Martha and Howard's decision was final. "I'm so sorry for both of you," said Heather with tears in her eyes, "and I'm sorry for us, because we're going to lose the family we've always known." "You won't lose anything," Howard assured. "You'll gain two people who respect each other and care for each other, even if they're no longer a couple." "It's true," Martha agreed, "and you'll always have two homes where you're welcome, two people who love you unconditionally." On the way back home, Howard and Martha drove in silence. The dinner had been emotionally draining for everyone, but it had also served as an official farewell to the family they had been for 3 decades. "The kids will be okay," said Martha when they were almost home. "They will, they're strong and smart. They inherited the best from both of us." "Howard, thank you for being so understanding about all this. I know it can't be easy for you." "It isn't easy, but it's the right thing to do." That night they slept in the same room for the last time. Howard stayed up late, listening to Martha's breathing and thinking how strange it would be to sleep alone after 30 years of sharing a bed with someone else. On Sunday morning, Martha packed her bags with the efficiency of someone who had planned that moment for weeks. She would take only her clothes and personal items, leaving everything else in the house as it was. "Are you sure you don't want to take anything else?" asked Howard. "I do. I want to start a new life with new things." He helped her carry the bags to the car, and they both stood in the garage for a few minutes, as if postponing the final moment of separation. "Well, I guess this is it," said Martha finally. "Yeah. Take care of your health, Howard, and be happy." "You too." They hugged for the last time as husband and wife, a long embrace that carried 3 decades of shared history. "If you ever need anything," began Howard. "I know where to find you," Martha completed with a sad smile. She got in the car and drove away without looking back. Howard stood in the empty garage, watching the car disappear down the street. When he could no longer see the vehicle, He went back inside the house and sat in the living room, now officially a single and wealthy man. The silence of the empty house was deafening. For 30 years, that space had been filled with conversations, laughter, arguments, television noises, the sound of pots and pans in the kitchen. Now, there was only the echo of Howard's own footsteps. He picked up his phone and called Gregory. "Dad, how did the farewell go?" "It was peaceful. Your mother is already at the new apartment. And how are you?" "I'm fine, son, sad but fine. Do you want me to come over and keep you company?" "No need. I'm going to take the opportunity to organize a few things here. Dad, you know you can count on me and Heather for anything, right?" "I know, son. And you can count on me, too." After hanging up the phone, Howard kept thinking about how to reveal to his children that his financial situation had completely changed. They were worried about his well-being, imagining he would be in difficulty after the separation. They had no idea that he now had enough resources to take care of the entire family for several generations. On Monday, Howard decided it was time to start organizing his new life. First, he needed to move out of that house that now officially belonged to Martha. Second, he needed to decide how to use the prize money wisely. And third, sooner or later, he needed to tell the children the truth. He started by looking for apartments to rent, but quickly realized his perspective had completely changed. With $23 million in the bank, he could buy a house, not just rent. He could choose whatever neighborhood he wanted, whatever size he wanted, whatever luxury he wanted. But Howard discovered something interesting about himself. He didn't want luxury. He wanted comfort, yes, but not ostentation. He wanted a beautiful and functional place, but not a mansion. He wanted quality of life, but not a display of wealth. After visiting several options, he decided on a simple but well-located house in the Cherry Creek neighborhood of Denver. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a spacious living room, and a small but well-kept backyard. It was the kind of house he had always dreamed of having, but which until then had been beyond his financial means. "Do you want to finance it?" asked the real estate agent. "No, I'll pay in cash." The agent's expression of surprise was visible. Howard realized he would have to get used to reactions like that, since his simple appearance didn't match the purchasing power he now possessed. On Tuesday, he signed the house purchase contract and arranged for the money transfer. In a matter of hours, he had become the owner of a property worth $250,000. It was a significant amount, but it represented only about 1% of his new fortune. While waiting for the house paperwork to be processed, Howard continued living in the house where he had spent the last 15 years with Martha. But now, instead of melancholy, he felt a strange sense of freedom. For the first time in decades, he could make decisions thinking only of himself. On Wednesday, he received an unexpected call from Martha. "Howard, sorry to bother you. It's just that I forgot a few things there at the house and wanted to know if I could come by to get them." "Of course. The house is still yours." "Thank you. Could it be this afternoon?" "Sure." When Martha arrived, Howard noticed she looked different, lighter, younger, as if the separation had lifted a weight from her shoulders. She was wearing more modern clothes and had changed her hairstyle. "You look different," he commented. "I feel different," she replied with a smile. "It's strange, but I feel like I'm rediscovering who I am." She gathered some books, some plants, and some decorative objects she had forgotten during the move. While doing so, she talked about her new routine in the apartment. "It's small, but it's mine. For the first time in decades, I have a space that's just mine, organized the way I want. I'm happy you're adapting well. And you? How is it being alone here?" "Peaceful. I'm taking the opportunity to organize a few things." "Have you thought about looking for someone?" she asked suddenly. The question caught Howard by surprise. "Looking for someone?" "Company. You're still young, Howard, and you're a good man. Any woman would be lucky to have you by her side." It was ironic to hear that from the person who had decided to give up having him by her side. "For now, I'm focused on getting my life in order by myself." "But don't close yourself off to possibilities, okay? You deserve to be happy." After she left, Howard kept thinking about the conversation. Martha seemed genuinely concerned about his well-being, but she also seemed anxious for him to move on and find someone else. It was as if she wanted to rid herself of any remaining guilt about the separation, making sure he would also be happy in his new life. On Thursday, Howard decided it was time to tell the children the truth. He invited them to dinner at the new house, which was already being prepared for his move. "Dad, what a beautiful house," exclaimed Heather when she arrived. "You bought this?" "I did." "But Dad, how did you get the money to buy a house?" asked Gregory, worried. "You didn't go into debt, did you?" "I didn't go into debt. Actually, I need to tell you something." Howard led them to the living room of the new house and asked them to sit down. The time had come to reveal the secret he had kept for over 2 weeks. "Kids, the night before your mother and I separated, something happened that completely changed my financial situation." "What was it, Dad?" "I won the lottery." The silence that followed was total. Gregory and Heather looked at their father as if he had spoken in a foreign language. "You won the lottery?" repeated Heather. "How much?" $23 million. This time the silence was even longer. Gregory got up from the armchair and began to pace the room. "Dad, are you serious?" "Completely serious. But that means that—" Heather was trying to organize her thoughts. "You won the lottery exactly when Mom decided to separate?" "On Saturday night after the dinner you organized to celebrate our wedding anniversary." "And does Mom know?" "She doesn't." Gregory stopped pacing and looked at his father with a disbelieving expression. "Dad, you didn't tell Mom you won $23 million. "I didn't." "But why? This changes everything. Mom would never have asked for a separation if she knew you were millionaires." Howard took a deep breath before explaining his reasoning. "Son, I found out your mother wanted the separation at the exact moment I won the prize. If I told her about the money, how would I know if she would stay for love or for interest?" "But Dad, that doesn't matter," insisted Heather. "What matters is that you stayed together." "It does matter, daughter. It matters a lot. I didn't want to spend the rest of my life wondering if my wife loved me or loved my bank account." Gregory sat down again and stared at his father for several minutes. "And now? Are you going to tell her?" "I don't know. I'm still deciding." "Dad, Mom has a right to know. She has a right to make an informed decision about what she wants to do." "What if she comes back just for the money?" "What if she doesn't come back?" asked Heather. "What if she finds out from other people and feels betrayed because you didn't tell her?" It was a possibility Howard had considered. The news about the prize would be announced by the lottery soon and would eventually reach Martha's ears. How would she react upon discovering that her ex-husband had hidden a fortune throughout the entire separation process? "Do you think I should tell her?" "I think so, Dad," replied Gregory. "She might not come back because of the money, but at least she'll know she had all the information to make her decision." "And if she does come back, what do I do?" "Then you'll have to trust her feeling," said Heather, "and in your ability to tell if they're genuine or not." The conversation went on late into the night, with the children trying to process the information about the prize and its implications for the family's future. In the end, they agreed that Martha should be told, but that Howard had the right to choose when and how to do it. On Friday, Howard officially moved into the new house. It was a simple process, as he had decided to take only his clothes and personal belongings. The children helped him with the move and were impressed by how quickly he was organizing his new life. "Dad, you seem more upbeat than I expected," commented Heather as she helped organize the clothes in the closet. "It's strange, but I feel good. Sad about the separation, but good about the prospect of a new life. And what are you going to do with all that money?" "I'm still thinking. First, I want to ensure financial security for both of you and my grandchildren. After that, maybe I'll invest in some business that gives me pleasure. Have you thought about stopping work?" "I have, but I don't think I'll stop. I like my job. Maybe I'll reduce my hours, but I want to keep doing something useful." It was true. Howard had discovered that the money didn't change his fundamental personality. He was still a simple man who found satisfaction in honest work and genuine human relationships. On Saturday, he decided it was time to tell Martha about the prize. He called her, and they arranged to meet at a cafe near the apartment where she was living. "You're looking well," she said when they met. "The single life is treating you well." "Martha, I need to tell you something important." "What is it?" Last Saturday, the day of our anniversary dinner, I won the lottery. Martha laughed, thinking it was a joke. Won how? You always say that when you get two numbers right. No, Martha. I won the jackpot, $23 million. The smile gradually faded from her face as she realized Howard was serious. You're joking, right? I'm not joking. 23 million? $23,945,612.34 to be exact. Martha was silent for several minutes, processing the information. When she finally spoke, her voice was different. And you didn't tell me? I didn't. Why? Howard explained his reasoning the same way he had explained it to the children. Martha listened without interrupting, but her expression changed as she understood the implications of what she was hearing. You thought I'd come back just because of the money. I didn't want to take that risk. Howard, you've known me for 30 years. How can you think I'm that mercenary? Martha, you said you wanted the separation because I could never give you more than I already did. If I had told you about the prize back then, how would I know if you were coming back for love or for money? She lowered her gaze, realizing her own words were being used against her. And now? Why are you telling me now? Because the children think you have the right to know, and because sooner or later the news will become public. And you? What do you think? I think you had the right to make your decision, knowing all the available information. Martha fell silent again, absently stirring the sugar she had asked for in her coffee. This changes everything, Howard. Changes? It changes because maybe I made a hasty decision. Or maybe you made the right decision for the wrong reasons. What do you mean? Martha, you said you didn't love me anymore, that you wanted different things from life. The money doesn't change that. In fact, the money would only be relevant if your decision was based on financial matters. She raised her eyes and looked him in the eye. Part of my decision was based on financial matters, yes. I saw our life as financially stagnant and thought it would never change. And the other part? The other part was about feelings, about not feeling what I used to feel anymore. And has that part changed with the news about the money? Martha hesitated before answering. I don't know. Everything is very confusing right now. Martha, I want you to be honest with me. If you come back, will it be because you still love me or because I'm rich now? I can't answer that right now, Howard. I need time to think. How much time? I don't know. A few weeks, maybe. They finished their coffee in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. When they said goodbye, Martha seemed completely different from the confident, determined woman who had left the house a week before. Howard? What? Thank you for telling me. Even though you waited, thank you for telling me. You're welcome. During the next 2 weeks, Howard heard nothing from Martha. He focused on organizing his new life, investing part of the money safely, and thinking about what to do with the rest. With the help of a financial advisor, he diversified the investments between conservative holdings and others with greater growth potential. He also set aside a significant amount to help his children with their future needs, without creating excessive dependence on the money. Howard discovered that being rich was more complicated than he had imagined. He needed to make decisions about investments, taxes, insurance, estate planning. It was a completely new world, requiring knowledge he didn't possess. But he also discovered positive aspects of wealth he hadn't anticipated. The feeling of financial security gave him a peace of mind he had never experienced. For the first time in his life, he didn't need to worry about bills at the end of the month, medical emergencies, or retirement. Gregory and Heather visited him regularly at the new house, still impressed by the change in their father's situation. They noticed Howard seemed more confident, more decided about his plans for the future. Dad, have you thought about what you'll do if Mom decides to come back? Heather asked during one of these visits. I think about it every day. And what's your conclusion? That I'll only accept it if I'm sure she's coming back for love, not for money. And how will you be sure of that? I don't know. Maybe it's impossible to be absolutely sure. Maybe I have to trust my intuition. 2 weeks after the conversation at the cafe, Martha called Howard asking to talk again. They met at the same house where they had lived for 15 years, now empty and echoing with memories of the past. How are you? she asked. I'm fine. And you? Confused. Very confused. Martha seemed to have lost weight since their last meeting. There were dark circles under her eyes, as if she hadn't been sleeping well. Howard, these 2 weeks have been the hardest of my life. Why? Because I needed to rethink everything. Our marriage, my decision to separate, my feelings, my reasons. And what conclusion did you come to? I came to the conclusion that I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. Howard felt his heart race but forced himself to stay calm. What kind of mistake? I let financial matters influence a decision that should have been purely emotional. When I said you could never give me more than you already did, I was talking about money, not love. And you realize this now that you know about the prize. I realized it when I spent 2 weeks living without you and missing you every day. Martha moved closer to him and touched his hand. Howard, I want to come back. Not for the money, but because I discovered I still love you. That I've always loved you, but was blinded by frustrations that had nothing to do with you. Howard looked into her eyes, searching for signs of sincerity. He saw tears forming. He saw genuine emotion, but he also saw the complexity of a situation where financial and emotional motives were inevitably mixed. Martha, how can I know if you're coming back for love or for convenience? Because I was missing you terribly even before I knew about the money. Because in the last 2 weeks, while I should have been happy with my freedom, I could only think about how stupid I was to throw away 30 years of a solid relationship. You said you didn't love me anymore. I lied to myself and to you. I was confused, frustrated with the life we had, and I thought the problem was love. But the problem was my own immaturity. Howard stayed silent for several minutes, analyzing Martha's words and trying to separate his own feelings from the logic of the situation. If I hadn't won the lottery, would you have come back? Honestly, maybe not, because it would have taken me much longer to realize my mistake. The money sped up my reflection, but it didn't create my feelings. And now? What do you want? I want to start over. I want to try again in a more mature way, more aware of what really matters in a marriage. And if I said I lost all the money tomorrow, I would still want to stay with you. Because I learned that the problem was never the lack of money. The problem was my lack of gratitude for what we had. Howard looked out the window of the empty house, thinking of all the years that had passed there, all the memories built, all the happy moments he had ignored by being focused on work and the struggle for financial survival. Martha, if we start over, it has to be different. I've changed in these last few weeks. The money changed my perspective on many things. I've changed too, and I want to get to know this new perspective of yours. It won't be easy. A lot of people will question your reasons for coming back. I know, and I'm prepared to deal with that. And if it doesn't work out, if we discover we really aren't compatible anymore, then at least we tried, and we'll end as friends, not as strangers. Howard got up from the chair and walked to the window where he used to stand watching the garden they had planted together. I need to think, Martha. This decision will affect the rest of our lives. I know, and I will respect any decision you make. Give me a few days. I'll give you all the time you need. After Martha left, Howard was alone in the empty house, weighing the pros and cons of a reconciliation. On one hand, there was the love of 3 decades and the possibility of rebuilding a stronger relationship. On the other, there was the doubt about Martha's true motives and the risk of living a lie for the rest of his life. He called Gregory and told him about the conversation. "And what are you thinking of doing, Mr. Howard?" "I'm thinking of giving her a chance to prove she came back for the right reasons." "How?" "I don't know yet, but I need a way to be sure." "Dad, sometimes absolute certainty doesn't exist. Sometimes we have to trust and hope for the best." "Son, do you think your mother is being sincere?" "I do, Dad. She called me yesterday crying, saying she had made the biggest mistake of her life. She seemed genuinely remorseful. And if she's lying? Then you'll find out in time and take the necessary measures. But if she's telling the truth and you don't give her a chance, you'll regret it for the rest of your life." It was a wise observation. Howard realized he had 2 options: trust and risk being deceived, or distrust and risk losing a real opportunity for happiness. The following Wednesday, he made his decision. He called Martha, and they arranged to meet at the same cafe where they had talked 2 weeks earlier. "I've decided to accept your proposal for a fresh start," he said without preamble. Martha's face lit up with a smile he hadn't seen in years. "Really? Really? But with a few conditions." "What conditions?" "First, we'll take it slow. No living together immediately. We'll date again, get to know each other as different people than we were a month ago." "I agree." "Second, I want total transparency about your feelings. If at any point you realize you're with me for the wrong reasons, you need to tell me immediately." "I agree to that too." "Third, we'll go to couples therapy. I want to make sure we're solving the real problems, not just masking them with money." "That's an excellent idea." "And fourth, if it doesn't work out, we end it as friends, without fights, without resentment." "I accept all the conditions." They hugged right there in the cafe, under the curious gazes of the other customers. It was strange to hug his ex-wife as if it were a first date, but it was also exciting to think about the possibilities that were opening up for them. "Martha?" "What?" "I missed you too." "Really? Really? As much as I thought our separation was necessary, I missed you terribly." They began the reconciliation process with care and patience. Martha kept her apartment, but they started seeing each other regularly for dinners, outings, long conversations. It was as if they were getting to know each other again, discovering aspects of one another that had been lost over the years of marriage. Howard was impressed with the changes in Martha. She seemed more mature, more aware of her own flaws, and more willing to work on the relationship's problems. The experience of separation had taught her to value what she had, instead of focusing on what she didn't have. Martha, in turn, noticed that Howard was more confident and decisive. The money had given him a security that was reflected in every aspect of his personality. He spoke with more authority, made decisions more quickly, planned the future with more ambition. Couples therapy revealed issues that both had ignored for years: communication problems, unspoken expectations, unmet needs. But it also revealed that the foundation of the relationship remained solid, and that the problems were treatable with goodwill and mutual effort. 6 months after the reconciliation, they decided to get married again. Not a renewal of vows, but a completely new wedding, with a small party for family and close friends. "This time I know exactly who I'm marrying," said Martha during the ceremony, "and I'm marrying the man I love, not the man I think I can change." "And I'm marrying the woman who chooses to be with me every day," replied Howard. "Not the woman who feels obligated to stay out of convenience." Gregory and Heather cried during the ceremony, happy to see their parents rediscover the love they had always had for each other. 1 year after the second wedding, Howard and Martha bought a house on the beach in Myrtle Beach on the Atlantic coast. It was Martha's dream house, but now she saw it as a symbol of a rebuilt relationship, not as an object of material desire. They used part of the prize money to create a foundation that offered scholarships to underprivileged youth from Denver. It was a way of giving back to the community that had welcomed them throughout their lives. Howard continued working as a building superintendent, but reduced his hours to part-time. He discovered he enjoyed the work regardless of financial need, and that the respect he had earned in the building over the years was more valuable than any salary. Martha went back to school and graduated in psychology at 62. She began volunteering to counsel couples with marital problems, using her own experience to help others avoid the mistakes she had made. 5 years after winning the lottery, Howard and Martha renewed their vows again, this time in a large ceremony to celebrate not only the love they had rediscovered, but also the wisdom they had gained about relationships, money, and happiness. "Do you regret hiding the lottery prize?" asked Martha one night as they sat on the porch of the beach house. "No," replied Howard without hesitation. "It was the best decision I ever made." "Why?" "Because it allowed me to discover that you truly love me, and it taught me that money only has value when it's shared with people who love us for who we are, not for what we have. And what if I hadn't come back? Then I would be a rich but lonely man, and I would have learned that not every problem can be solved with money." They sat in silence for a few minutes, listening to the sound of the waves and watching the stars in the clear beach sky. Howard. What? Thank you for giving me a second chance. Thank you for coming back for the right reasons. And there, on the porch of the house they had built with the lottery money but on the solid foundation of a rediscovered love, they knew they had finally found the formula for happiness. It wasn't about having a lot of money, or a little money, but about having the right people with whom to share whatever amount of money life offered them. The story of Howard and Martha spread through the Denver community as an example that relationships can be saved when people are willing to look beyond their own immediate needs and focus on what really matters. Gregory and Heather grew as people by witnessing their parents' journey. They learned that true love requires constant work, honest communication, and the humility to admit mistakes. They applied these lessons in their own marriages, creating stronger and more mindful relationships. Howard and Martha's grandchildren grew up in a family where money was seen as a tool for doing good, not as an end goal. They learned values of hard work, honesty, and generosity that would stay with them for life. The foundation created by the couple helped hundreds of young people gain access to higher education, transforming not only their individual lives, but also the future of their families and communities. Howard never played the lottery again, not because he no longer believed in luck, but because he had learned that true fortune was not in the winning numbers, but in the people we choose to love and who choose to love us back. And when people asked what the secret to the success of his reconciliation was, he always replied, "Sometimes we need to lose something to understand how much it's worth. And sometimes we need to win something to understand that it's worth nothing without the right people by our side." End of story. Now tell me what you thought of this story of overcoming and true love. Do you believe Howard made the right decision by hiding the lottery prize? And Martha, did she really come back for love, or did the money influence her decision? Leave your honest opinion in the comments and share your own reflections on relationships and money. Don't forget to leave your like if the story touched your heart, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other emotional stories like this one.